Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I'm Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst at friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Joining me on this episode is Nicklaus Gaut of FanGraphs. Nicklaus, welcome to the show.
Justin, thanks so much for having me, man. Great to be here.
Remind everybody where you can reach on social media and then plug all your work over there at FanGraphs.
Okay, so you can find me on Twitter at not Burt Reynolds. It's NT_Burt Reynolds. And then, like you just mentioned, I am one of your colleagues at FanGraphs. Right now, I'm in the middle of just doing positional ranks, position by position, using my own projections to kind of, general first round of ranks and whatnot. And then I also write at rotoballer.com, do a heavy amount of content with head-to-head point leagues, and run a custom service for point league players as well.
Nice. And I appreciate you putting not Burt Reynolds in in your Twitter, because people would be confused. Like, I feel like they would not. Yeah. I mean, I remember meeting you at First Pitch Arizona and being like, oh my God, Burt Reynolds showed up. And then it was like, oh no, that's not Burt Reynolds.
It saves just a lot of hassle. Like you said, like that's the most common thing. People think they've seen a ghost. I'm like, no. So just going with that, I find saves me some answering questions.
Absolutely. We are discussing the Pittsburgh Pirates today, which is it's got a few good nuggets for fantasy and some interesting guys to talk about, but also some not so interesting guys to talk about. So we'll speed through some of those guys, especially starting here at catcher, where the Pirates have a tandem of Austin Hedges and Tyler Heineman. Do you care about either of these guys for fantasy?
Not unless you're in like a two-catcher NL only league. There's no need to pay attention to either of them. They are placeholders for Indy Rodriguez in the minor leagues, who should be paid attention to, a switch hitter, one of their top prospects, but not for this year. This year, it's a little Hedges Heineman.
Is there any format, like outside of like Keeper Dynasty, that you're drafting Indy Rodriguez?
I could see doing it in, DCs, the deepest of drafts. Yes, a late round dart when 750 people are being drafted. Okay, just in case. But that's really it. I don't think he'll get any sort of reasonable chance to play enough games to be fantasy viable.
Yeah, and I tend to agree there, because the Pirates have been a team to show that like they care more about service time than anything else. Like they're not going to bring him up until they feel like they're like getting full max value on him. And so like it'd be surprising for me to see him up before the All-Star break, to be quite honest. And I know there are a lot more people in the industry that are like higher on Endy than I am in terms of like his prospects for this year. But at the end of the day, like I don't trust the Pirates after what we've seen them do with countless top tier prospects and holding them back. Like I just don't see a path to like full-time playing time earlier on in the season.
Yeah, agreed. There's just that would be incredibly out of character for the Pirates if they were to start the big clock on him this year. It would just, sure, it could happen, but it would just, they've never really done it before.
Yeah. Let's move on into the infield, where you've got like a first base DH kind of grouping of Ji-Man Choi and Carlos Santana. Now, this could be somewhat interesting in a deeper league, but how often do you find yourself thinking about drafting Ji-Man Choi or Carlos Santana?
I would say almost never. They will be useful in leagues. Like I said, once again, draft champion leagues on NBC, where just 50 round drafts, 15 teams. Yes, you're gonna need guys like that to fill in the back of your benches, but most leagues, no, they're not going to be drafted, but you'll probably might need to pick them up at some point. They are good versus certain hands. Choi has his hot stretches. Last year, he had a 214 WRC plus in April, 157 in June, 131 in September, over each month, like 50 to 80 plate appearances. He is also ice cold in between those. He was better than he usually is versus lefties last year. That is going to come back to earth. It's not going to be a full-time job. And besides like picking him up as, fill-ins in like 15 team leagues on NFBC, yeah, occasionally you're going to be like, man, I need to spend $2 on G-Man Choi to fill in for an injury. Besides that, not a lot of interest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we talk about this enough in the industry in terms of a team like Pittsburgh, probably because Pittsburgh sucks and they don't have a lot of fantasy viable guys to begin with. But the Pirates only had 2 guys who got enough plate appearances last year to be qualified hitters. And that's because they mix and match quite a bit, and because they don't have very good guys on that team. And so, I think there were some people who were thinking that G-Man Choi would, probably get more plate appearances in Pittsburgh than he was in Tampa, and therefore making him a little bit more interesting in those deeper leagues. I don't know if that's the case. I still think they're going to mix and match Santana and G-Man Choi. It could end up being platoon partners for the most part, with Santana then filling in at DH. But I could also see them using that DH as kind of a rotating spot to get other guys plate appearances as well. So I'm probably staying away from both, except for in draft champions leagues and as a fill-in, like you mentioned. Rodolfo Castro is a guy that looks like he might not get platoon. There is some power, there is some speed. There isn't very much contact. Are you drafting Rodolfo Castro?
Again, in deeper leagues, sure. In normal 12-team leagues with Fab, I'm not going to mess with it. I can see the appeal of, you look at his numbers from last year and you can see the power, you can see some speed, even with a bad batting average. But there's not a lot of hope for the batting average, not a lot of hope for runs and RBIs batting at, near the bottom of the Pittsburgh lineup. And the power is the power was backed by legitimate big exit velocities and ones that increased in the second half. Average exit velocity on balls in the air was up 3 miles per hour. The percent of his balls in the air over 100 miles per hour increased from 25% to 43%. So from well below average to well above average. Bad hitters park, that's not going to help him. But even if the power comes in, the batting average, runs, RBIs are, likely sink. And he is fairly terrible versus right-handers. He had a 284 WOBA last year, 271 xWOBA, 639 OPS. He might not be in risk of a platoon right now until someone even moderately better is available, which on the Pirates may not happen all year. So there's that, but he is just not the type of player I'm looking to draft, except for in the deepest of leagues.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Like I said, there's a pop for sure. There's a little bit of speed in there as well. But what he just does not have is the ability to make contact. I mean, we're talking about a guy with sub 80% zone contact in the majors last year. He's always been projected as kind of like a 30 grade hit tool. I just don't know that he's ever going to make enough contact to unlock the power that is in that bat full time. So, yeah, I mean, outside of the deepest of leagues, like draft champions, he shouldn't really even be a consideration, or NL only shouldn't really be a consideration for most people. All right, moving on to a guy who actually is a consideration for a lot of people. O'Neal Cruz is another guy with massive power. And when I say massive, I mean massive power and speed. But the hit tool, again, is a bit concerning. Are you drafting O'Neal Cruz, who's going as a top 8 shortstop?
I am not drafting O'Neal Cruz. I wrote quite a bit about him in my shortstop rankings piece. And it's not even that what my projections for him put him way off of his draft price. It makes him not a bargain at his draft price, but the risk is so heavy. And I don't really want to mess up at shortstop just because the waiver shortstop is not shallow as far as starters go. Shortstop is going to be shallow on the wire. And I ran into a lot of those issues last year, and I don't want to take a lot of risk with my starting shortstop, especially when guys, safer but less flashy options like Corey Seager, is around, Xander Bogaerts around that same area. But the upside of Cruz cannot be denied. Like you said, he hits the ball incredibly hard. If you mention his name to most baseball fans, the first thing they'll think of is 122 mile per hour max exit velocity. That is, of course, top 1%. And it wasn't just that 122. Only 11 players last year hit a ball over 117 miles per hour. Once you get past Stanton, who of course led with 10, the rest of the list was Aaron Judge 2, Ohtani 3, Vlad Jr. 4, and O'Neal Cruz 4. So tied for second. He hits the ball really, really hard. Any exit velocity stat you want to look at was great overall and was better in the second half. And with that, I think he's kind of a lock for 25 home runs, and he has top 2% speed, even though he's 6'7" and just an absolute monster. And so I think 15 stolen bases is also a lock and could go way over that. Just with the new stolen base rules and, how much the Pirates want to let him run. But like you said, there are big time holes in his swing. He is very, very bad versus like left-handers, like total liability bad, slashed 158 with a 532 OPS and 235 WOBA against him with a 53% K rate. Over 110 plate appearances, he struck out over half the time. Luckily for the Pirates, he's still going to play against them. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but he's never hit him in the minors. He's been embarrassing against him in the majors. I have a hard time that's just going to get figured out. And just his contact overall versus both hands is some of the worst you'll find. 62% contact rate last year. That stayed steady by half. And his I look a lot at Z swing minus O swing, how much you swing into zone compared to how much you swing out of the zone. He is, once again, some of the worst in baseball, down in the, Javi Baez, Daniel Vogelbach range. And while it did increased a little bit in the second half, it still kept him in that bottom tier. So with power, yes. Speed, yes. Batting average is a sink, and the runs in RBI will be okay because he's going to bat. He's going to bat leadoff every day that Pittsburgh will let him. But on that team, it's opportunities aren't going to be as good. And it is positive to see that coming behind him, there'll be some, Pittsburgh, while they have their shortcomings, they have signed some, real major league hitters like Choi and Carlos Santana and Andrew McCutchen, like not stars, but they're also not the normal Pittsburgh drag. So that does make me a little more bullish on his runs, but overall, it's a lot of risk for a top 75 pick.
I mean, I'm right there with you. Like, I love the power and speed of O'Neal Cruz. I was big on him last year, and Ozzy was coming up through the minor leagues, but I am super worried about the holes in that swing and what the batting average is going to look like. I think he's going to hit for a ton of power. I think he's going to steal a ton of bases. And so if you don't care about batting average, you don't care about strikeouts, then more power to you. Go for it. But I think there is a downside right now that the projections and the ADP especially aren't accounting for. And like you said, like there's just so many options going behind him at shortstop that are so much safer. So if you're playing in a 10-team roto league, I get it. Like, I absolutely get it. If you're playing in a 15-team roto league, it becomes a lot more difficult because, like you said, like the waiver wire for shortstop is not very good in spite of the fact that the position is a pretty darn deep position for the most part. Like, I'm in a draft champions right now, and I waited on shortstop, and I'm regretting it all day long.
Yeah, and just one more quick thing on his power potential. Yes, he hits the ball crazy hard, but he also is going to need to elevate the ball a lot harder. That 120 mile per hour max exit velocity was not a ball hit in the air. So it was not a home run. He had a 44% air percent last year. So fly balls and line drives. That was 201st of players, minimum 350 plate appearances, or 0.2% higher than Yandy Diaz. And his 12.3 degree launch angle was halved from the first half to the second half. So that's probably just, that's young player stuff. That's why it's like, I don't want to be like an O'Neal Cruz hater because he's 23 years old and has some just electric tools. But top 75 pick in 2023 is just too rich for me.
Yeah, I mean, I have a really hard time, even with my projections, loving him just because of the amount of power and speed you get from him. Let's talk about another guy who struggles with launch angle, and that's Ke'Bryan Hayes. He also struggles staying on the field. I love what Ke'Bryan Hayes could be in a full season, but I wonder if we still overrate him, kind of wish casting he's going to turn into the player we want him to, or if we should start accepting him for who he is. Where are you at on Ke'Bryan Hayes, Nicklaus?
So kind of the same issues that you just mentioned, but projection wise, because the position third base is so bad, my projections have him kind of right there with ADP. But I think the problem with Hayes is that we still dream of those 95 plate appearances in 2020 when he hit 5 home runs. He had air EVs in the 83rd percentile. And a guy that coming up through the system had always been seen as a glove first, probably not big fantasy play guy, came up in his first taste of the big leagues and hit some home runs and had the EVs to back him. And everyone was like, all right, Ke'Bryan Hayes, like not just a glove. Well, the problem is Hayes hasn't been anything like he was in 2020 since 2020. All his roto rates, home runs per PA, runs RBI, stolen bases, excuse me, not stolen bases, but runs RBI, they've all dropped and they've been steady. Batting average, expected batting average, all went back to kind of what we expected before that big outburst in 2020. He had in that great year, he had a 450 BABIP. Like, of course that was going to come down. And so you kind of, when I'm doing my projections, I have things, all these rates and numbers set up in their own little lines. And it's very clear looking at Hayes that the 21-22 version we've seen is the version we're going to get, which is a fine version because his glove will always keep him on the field. The batting average won't kill you. And he just doesn't have very much power. Like people are, they want that 15 to 20 home run power. And I just don't think it's going to ever come in.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like, I had a big argument with Paul and Sleeping on the Bus about Hayes, and I like Hayes. Like, I like Hayes a lot, and I think we can pretty much book 20 stolen bases and some decent counting categories with him as long as he plays a full season. But I don't know where the power comes from. Like, the power growth isn't going to happen until that launch angle gets raised, and you show nothing at the major league level to tell me that that is even a part of his game. He may be deciding, hey, like, why would I when I can just spray it around? That's just as valuable to my team as a table setter than it is to be trying to hit it out of the park in a park that isn't great for power anyways. So I like Brian Hayes, and I'm right there at ADP in terms of my projections as well. But like, I don't think there's another level in the power, at least not as of yet. So if you're hoping that one day he's going to be like a 2020 or a 2030 kind of guy, like I just don't see that in the immediate future. Do we care about Ji-Won Bae at all?
If you think he's going to play and you like speed, then yes. That is by far his calling card. He stole 30 bases in under 500 PA in AAA last year. He a lefty. He has some issues with lefties, but he's a young guy that doesn't have a full-time role yet, but is being blocked by the likes of, Rodolfo Castro and Zach Suwinski. So if you think that he earns a decent chunk of playing time soon and needs some late stolen bases, then, Bay could be your guy. His ADP is nothing. He's not being drafted in a great majority of leagues, of, your regular 12-team leagues and below. But he is, even at I think he'll be a better waiver wire pickup probably than he will be person to draft.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think he's kind of a watch list guy. I think he is a little bit interesting because of the contact ability and the speed, and the fact that Rodolfo Castro ahead of him at second base doesn't have very much contact ability and could easily find himself in more of a bench kind of role, maybe on like a short side platoon or something like that. So he's a guy I'm watching. Draft champions, I might take a late dart throw just in case, especially if I need speed late in the draft. So, but I think in your standard leagues, he's definitely just more of a watch list guy. Let's talk about Brian Reynolds. I don't know if he's going to be on the Pirates come opening day. I think he hopes he's not on the Pirates come opening day. But where are you taking him in drafts? Because I feel like he's getting slept on a little bit.
He gets slept on every year. He's one of these guys that I have particular affinity for, because when I first started writing about fantasy, he was like one of the first guys that I was writing a lot about. Him and Brandon Nimmo were my guys early, and just he doesn't have a big flashy tool, but he is well above average in just about every category. And I think the stolen bases, he's a person with, given his, not great speed, but above average speed, I think he's going to get a boost from new rules. And it's not a flashy profile. It's not a flashy name. And he plays in Pittsburgh. So that's a recipe for getting slept on. And I have him, I'm above the ADP mark. I have him as my number 18, 19 outfielder, something like that. He is, even if he stays on Pittsburgh the entire year, he is an incredibly safe play, I think, in all categories. And best case is that he, someone pays the king's ransom that Pittsburgh apparently wants for him, and he plays at least part of the year on a contender and gets a big boost to his runs and RBI.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. Like, I have him. He's currently going as the number 22 outfielder on NFBC and Draft Champions League since Christmas. So that's like the last month, which is a good 26, draft sample. I have him as my 15th outfielder. Like, he does everything you want. And I think just because he is on Pittsburgh, and he doesn't have like the, I guess he doesn't have technically like a carrying tool in fantasy. Though he hit 27 home runs, like that's pretty damn good with, the stolen bases and batting average. Like, I love Brian Reynolds. I feel like he's completely overlooked right now, which is hard to do in a pretty shallow outfield position right now. So, I'm a big fan of Brian Reynolds this year, and I expect to have him on a lot of teams in upcoming drafts, especially if he gets traded. Now, the price will definitely go up if he gets traded, so I don't mind if he stays in Pittsburgh, but I don't think it's going to jump up to the level of where he should actually even be going at this point, even if he does get moved.
Yeah, And I think another thing to mention is that, for the people that are afraid that his batting average took such a dip in 2022 after, he had a 314 in 2019, a 302 in 2021, and a 262 average this year. But he is one of the guys who should really be helped by the shift ban. He last year his batting average versus the shift was 247. His batting average without the shift was I'm sorry, wrong spreadsheet. But I was thinking I was supposed to be saying BABIP. His BABIP versus the shift last year was 275. His BABIP no shift was 348, and that kind of the same trend happened the year before, as shifts against him had increased from 30% to 53% last year. So he is the type of hitter that is primed to get a big boost from the rule change and get back up in that. Like, I have him projected for a 281 average. I think that might be a little low.
Yeah, I think that is a really, really good point. I also want to point out, just like the BABIP in general was lower than we kind of have seen from him in the past. I mean, he's a career 334 BABIP guy. He had a 306 BABIP last season. I'm wondering what I have him projected for average-wise, because I might even need to bump him up a little bit.
I'd bump him up. He's one of those, like, he is like, different players depending on their skill set are going to be affected by the shift changes differently, and he is one of people automatically want to think about those left-handed pull guys, those left-handed pull power guys getting a boost, and overlook the fact guys like Reynolds, who teams have been shifting, they've been increasing their shift against them. The shift has been working. Now with it being banned, like, I'm not saying he's going to return to the 300 hitter he was in 2019 and 2021, but I think he's going to be a lot closer to that than the 260 he was last year.
Yeah, I have him for 275, which I feel is a nice conservative projection, which is typically what I want to go with anyway. So, yeah. Let's talk about Andrew McCutchen kind of returning to Pittsburgh. I don't know if this is a farewell tour, going back home or going back to where the career started, and like doing one last year in Pittsburgh, but or if this is just, hey, he just that was the place where he could get the most playing time. He should get a lot of playing time. Are you drafting Andrew McCutchen
at his current price? Yeah, like I have him as a large value. Now it kind of depends on league size, because like you mentioned, I think he's going to get a lot of playing time. But there's no reason not to play him. You bring your homegrown star home. Don't know if this will be his last year, his second last year, but it's coming. And it's not like he's Miguel Cabrera. Like, McCutchen was a top 50 outfielder in 12-team leagues last year. I mean, just barely, but he was. And, you look at the skills, and things are degrading. He's 36 years old, but they're not, no cliffs have been jumped over on his rates. So I think that he'll put up, not as good as production as last year. I don't think he's going to be a top 50 outfielder again, but like top 75 and like worthy of being a starter in a lot of leagues. Yeah, I think he will be.
Especially with how many players in the outfield end up having multi-position eligibility, and like you end up moving him around your roster throughout the year. Like, he's going to have a lot of value playing every day in Pittsburgh. Yeah, I feel like he's another one of these guys in Pittsburgh that's a little bit undervalued by the market, probably because he plays in Pittsburgh, but he's going to play every day. There's still some pop in that bat. Yeah, I'm a fan of McCutchen, especially for your guys' deeper formats. What about Jack Sawinski? Like, you see what he did in such a small sample in terms of the power, and you start like dreaming on a full season's worth of plate appearances, but there are red flags. Where are you at with Jack Sawinski? You're on mute. Nick, you're on mute.
I am so sorry. I was on mute. So getting back to Jack Sawinski, yeah, like you said, it's easy to get very excited about him because you see 19 home runs in less than 400 plate appearances. How can you not get excited about that? But there, like you said, red flags abound. He's never going to hit for average. I don't think so. His exit velocities were, very, above average. He had an above average barrel rate that increased in the second half. And he also had an extremely high home run to fly ball rate, which was 28% for the year. But also let me note that is not FanGraphs numbers. That is calculated without infield fly ball. So it will be different than you see on FanGraphs. But hit a lot of home runs for not hitting a massive amount of fly balls, and the contact is not there. He really feels like one of those young guys that has that one flashy tool and might get him overdrafted a little bit of people dreaming, and is just going to quickly turn into the fourth outfielder type that doesn't play very much.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. Like I have him for 20 home runs this year, which, like, considering he hit 19 and 372 plate appearances, doesn't seem like a lot. But like I also think like the batting average is going to be atrocious. It's going to be an absolute drain on you. I don't know that he's a guy who gets to 500 plate appearances because I think he could easily be in a straight platoon. I think if you need some late power, especially in a format where you can kind of pretty easily move him in and out, when he's out of the lineup, I think he makes a little bit of sense. But like, yeah, he's just a batting average suck, unfortunately. Like I think I have him projected for like a 207 batting average, which is unfortunate because it really does hurt you in most formats to kind of roster a guy with that kind of batting average floor. Do we care about Cal Mitchell or Connor Joe at all?
No, I mean, I in some leagues, you'll, not to the extent of like how we talked about with Choi and Santana, but there are some deep leagues where, facing the right number of right-handed, the handed pitchers you need for a week, and you need a swap in because, like you said, there's a lot of something I tried to highlight in my outfielder ranks article, and as well as the article I did for FanGraphs before that, just on general splits, is that there's a lot of you hit a cliff in outfield at a certain point where there are not a lot of full-time jobs guaranteed. And I think that's the cliff that very much needs to be paid attention to. And so, yeah, Connor Joe, Cal Mitchell, sure, they might be fill-ins for their occasional hot streaks. Connor Joe, I used to get a lot of hype, mostly because he played in Colorado, and he did nothing with said hype. And I don't really think that's going to increase now in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. So let's move on into the rotation. Roansy Contreras is a guy who has unbelievable skills and talent, but kind of got jerked around by the Pirates quite a bit. It seems like this will be the year where they finally let him kind of just stay in that major league rotation, and might even be like the opening day starter at this point, considering the rest of that rotation. Are you excited for year 2 of Roansy Contreras?
I really, really am. I really like him. He has great stuff. Loved him last year. Hated how much, like you said, he just really got jerked around in and out of that Pittsburgh rotation and made him infuriating to try and roster. I had him in a number of DCs. I drafted him late, and great when you could use him. Has a plus fastball, a plus slider. Good, a workable curveball, just overall good stuff. And I'm really hoping they take the actual chains off him this year, and he is just a full-time member of the rotation and gets 27, 28 starts and 150 plus innings.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm very, very excited that like we could finally be getting a full season of Ronzi. Um, you know, and if people are looking at like the 95 innings last year at the majors and going, oh, like how many innings can we expect? He threw 34 in the minors. Like he could pretty easily get to 150, maybe even 160 innings, depending on how Pittsburgh wants to kind of use him. They've got no reason to play the games where they send him down, bring him back up, send him down, bring him back up anymore. So yeah, I think this is an opportunity for Ronzi to kind of take a really big step forward. And I feel like he's being overlooked a little bit, in spite of the fact that like he was like a really hot commodity in drafts last year and off the waiver. Like people like, when he would get sent down and people would drop him, like people would blow a lot of fab when he came back up. So I like Ronzi quite a bit this year.
Yeah. And the ADP, like I thought the ADP was going to be a lot higher. It's looking at all drafts on NFBC since the beginning of January, like 40 drafts. He got a 320 ADP with a minimum of 258 and a maximum of 340. I did not expect that. I expected it to be, people to be feeling a lot about him draft wise, kind of like Patrick Sandoval last year, like that type, that around 200 ADP where people would even take a chance a little bit earlier. And so to see him past 300 is very surprising.
Yeah, I get like that he is on a Pirates team that isn't going to win a lot of games, and therefore it makes it hard for him to win games. But like the rest of it is great. Like I really, really like the upside. So I'm a little surprised that he is not getting more love currently in the market. So we'll kind of see what happens with that. But I think people are sleeping on him a little bit. The rest of the rotation is Rich Hill, Mitch Keller, JT Brubaker, and Vince Velasquez. Are there any of these guys you're targeting in drafts?
Targeting? No. Brubaker, that's it's not a guy I'm drafting. It's someone will draft him in deeper leagues, and then he'll be on the waiver wire because he mostly stinks, but occasionally we'll have a good matchup. Vince Velasquez I will not be ever tricked by Vince Velasquez. I haven't been tricked by him in years, even though he occasionally looks really good. I can't say this any plainer. He is a human gas can. I don't care if he has a hot streak. Eventually, he will turn back into that gas can, and he will light your ratios on fire. And you will never know when it's come, so you should never really mess with him. Rich Hill should not be drafted. He's like 1 million years old and he throws 95% curveballs. But I promise you he will be streamable again because in the right matchup at a good pitcher's park, he's occasionally going to give you 5 or 6 innings and allow 1 run and strike out 3 people and probably get a no decision with the Pirates. But he'll do Rich Hill things, but there's no real reason to draft him. Mitch Keller is the clearest, besides Ronzi, is the clearest, most interesting person on the staff. I'm not targeting him. I might end up with him some. The story of Keller, was the same for a number of years in that people would occasionally get tricked by him being good for a couple of weeks, think he was better than he was, and forget that he has had a very flat 4-seamer that could just get hammered. And then back to the waiver wire he would go. But then last year he made a real change that brought real results, swapping out that flat 4-seamer for going to majority of sinkers, and the things changed. He made that switch in early June, and in his final 21 starts, he had a 3.2 ERA. It was very clearly attributed to the Pitts mix. And so the question is that do you believe that will continue again? I don't believe enough to target him and make sure he's I'm drafting at the end of like 12-team leagues and whatnot. but he's got a 475 ADP on NFBC. Like I'll pick him in draft champions for the upside in deep leagues. And, in the 12-team leagues where he inevitably doesn't get drafted, I'm going to keep a pretty good eye on him, because if we see him in the spring and he's still using that same pitch mix and he's still getting good results from, that's the thing with pitchers, is like, see good results. Is it backed by a noticeable and trackable change? That's what we saw with Keller last year. So if he shows up in spring and does the exact same thing, I'm paying attention to that. And, maybe he's an early waiver wire pickup, or if you're drafting in March, maybe then I start throwing more darts at him. But, pitchers that start doing good things after making a big change, like, that's always worth keeping an eye on, even if you're in Pittsburgh and likely to get 5 wins.
Yeah, the only problem with Keller is even after that change, like, he was still a whip killer.
Yeah.
And that's like, just, I think it's one of those things that's kind of overlooked for some reason. Whip is always like the category, kind of like runs scored for hitters, like that people kind of either don't pay attention to or just kind of overlook. But man, a 134 whip during that stretch just tells me like the upside just isn't there until he stops allowing so much contact. And the problem is, like, he's got like an 88% zone contact. He allows so many balls in play that a lot of them are going to find holes. So I agree with you. I think he's just a deep league guy. He will get innings this year. They're gonna use him to soak up a lot of innings. So in those draft champions leagues, he does make a lot of sense. It's kind of a guy you can pull up from your roster when other guys are hurt. But for the most part, I'm probably not gonna have very much Mitch Keller. I'm not falling for that one again in the same way you're not falling for Velasquez.
Hey, you make a really good point, and on about whip, and I think it is something, like you said, is very overlooked in fantasy, because I think too often we think that ERA and whip travel together, and that that ratios go together, and it's just, it'll be fine. It's really not, and I've been guilty of that in the past too, like ignoring that just brutal whips. Like, I really like Pablo, to mention Sandoval again, I really like Patrick Sandoval, but when you have a guy like that on your staff, you need to understand what a big drag that is going to be on your ratios. And it's not that you can't have guys like that, but if you're going to have guys like that, you better have a plan on the back end about your other starters and what you're going to do with your relievers.
Yeah, I think, Rosie Contreras, another guy like who doesn't, in spite of like, I think a pretty good ERA upside, he does allow so much contact that like the whip may not be as sparkling, especially depending on where the walk rate falls in 2022. So just, something to be kind of cautious of and cognizant of is that your whip can really hurt you with some guys who on the surface otherwise look pretty good. Let's talk about the closing situation and David Bednar. He's the unquestioned guy this entering the year, right? And where would you be drafting him? And if he goes down, who do you think would be the next man up?
So I do like Bednar quite a lot. I like his stuff a lot. What pushed down people's interest in him last year was, like any closer that becomes good on the Pirates, you just assume they're going to get traded at the deadline. And then you don't know if they're going to be getting saves or not. Bednar did not get moved last year. I don't think it's that surprising, especially, we know what they're asking for Brian Reynolds, and David Bednar isn't Brian Reynolds, but he's still a year away from arbitration. And the Pirates probably will trade him eventually, but it doesn't have to happen this year. It doesn't have to happen at the deadline. So I'm more confident that it's just going to be his job all year. There's no real competition in there. I would say, if he goes down, or if you're looking for a handcuff in really deep leagues, Robert Stevenson would be my choice. I had him on, probably far too many DCs last year as the same kind of thing as like the dreaded Colorado handcuff. But the stuff has improved since, long ago when he was a hot prospect for the Reds. and I think he's a I think he's a much better setup guy. But if Bednar were to go down, I think he would get the shot.
Yeah, I think you absolutely nailed it. I do like Bednar. I actually just drafted him in the current DC I'm running right now, or I'm in right now, as my closer one, because I missed out on a lot of other closer options and then backed him up immediately with a higher end closer too. I don't think he's going to get traded. I agree. They really like him. He's like a fan favorite of the organization and
Yes.
of the fans in Pittsburgh, and I think that he's one of the few guys that I don't think they intend on trading at all at any point. So, yeah, I think he's a pretty stable kind of low-end closer one this year. All right, Nicklaus, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Justin. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media and plug all your work.
So you can reach me at NotBurtReynolds on Twitter, and I write weekly for FanGraphs and do a lot of writing on Rotoballer. If you play head-to-head points, make sure and check me out over there. I do a lot of content on head-to-head points, but we also have a custom point service where you can put in all your league settings, send it to us, and then within a day or so, you get a fancy little spreadsheet group from me that has all your league settings translated into dollar amounts using the latest ATC projections, and just kind of make it very easy on you to draft.
There you go. You can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. Email me or the show, friendsoffantasybenefits@gmail.com. Writing daily over at FanGraphs. Doing these 30-team previews in 30 days. Only a few more days left, getting towards the end of the month, and I can be done with these and move on into regular pods. So definitely enjoy the rest of these team previews, and then stay with us as we move into regular off-season content here at Friends of Fantasy Benefits. Don't forget those 5-star reviews. They will get you entered in to win a free t-shirt every month from RotoWare for the rest of the preseason. For the next 3 months, we'll give away a t-shirt every month to a random 5-star review. For Nicklaus and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball off season.